Dan Dickau here for the ISO on the Gonzaga Nation Media Network. It is Mailbag Wednesday episode here on Wednesday, October the 19th. It's hard to believe Gonzaga's first scrimmage, they used to be secret, they're not so secret anymore, is only 9 days away. Yes, that's right, 9 days away. They play against Tennessee, who is a top 12, top 15 type team to start the season. Very talented under Coach Rick Barnes, but that game will be able to be watched on pay-per-view. Check out any of our links on Gonzaga Nation SI, where to be able to follow the game, pay for the game, watch the game, track the game, stream the game, whatever. You can be able to watch that online. But this being a Mailbag Wednesday episode, each Wednesday take 3 viewer or listener questions, regardless of what it could be. It could be basketball related. It could be Gonzaga related. Send your questions my way and I answer them. You have a question? Dickau at scorebooklive.com is the email address. Social media, Instagram at ddickau21 or Twitter at, excuse me, at Dan Dickau21, or you can hit up any of our Gonzaga Nation SI social media channels. So the first question comes from Phil in Coeur d'Alene. He asks, why Chicago State to end the season? Good question. It's not normal to finish the game with the regular season with a non-conference, but the way that the WCC schedule kind of finished up and then had such a large gap before the WCC tournament in Las Vegas, I don't think you necessarily want your guys sitting around for 9-10 days. You want to be able to have something current out in front of them to be able to teach and motivate to in practice. And so I think that was one reason. Granted, Gonzaga's obviously they've won the league the last however many years. And so they typically have a double bye going into the semifinals in Las Vegas. So their gap, their stretch of not having games is longer than anybody else's. And you don't want to lose all of your conditioning. You don't want to lose your focus on how you have prepared for games throughout the course of the season. So that long gap can be difficult to navigate. So I understand and I agree with the reason to add this game. Chicago State is an independent at the Division I level. They're not very good, but it's an independent, so they aren't really tied to end of season or conference tournament schedules like pretty much everybody else is out there. The other reason, and I don't think this is as big of a reason, but who knows, maybe it played some decision to add a game there, is senior night a lot of times has fallen it always falls the last home game of the regular season. And many times the league schedules it so that it's against a BYU or a St. Mary's. And it kind of, at times senior night can take away a little bit of the focus on the task at hand, and that's winning the game. We saw a number of years ago when Gonzaga was chasing a undefeated regular season. Spokesman Review had T-shirts printed up. They had, the next day's newspaper printed up. All these things to celebrate an undefeated season on senior night if they were to come out with a victory. The stress being on if they came out, because as we all know, Gonzaga lost to BYU that day. Undefeated season was no longer possible. But, that being said, your last regular season conference home game is against St. Mary's, and you don't want to take away any focus of preparing to win that game, as opposed to the emotions many times of a senior night, especially this year, with Drew Timme, who's obviously I would imagine at that point in time is going to be wrapping up his third consecutive All-American campaign. And so you want to keep the focus on the game itself. And, when you're playing a high-level opponent like St. Mary's, sometimes it can get in the way. Next question is Tim from Vancouver, Washington. He asks, there's lots of Southwest Washington guys that have gone through Gonzaga's program and had great careers. What do you think of Caden Perry? I think Caden Perry's got a tremendous future. I think he's got a chance to be a really good player. The player that comes to mind because of his athleticism, his size, his build, and hopefully the trajectory and the ascension of his skill development would be Brandon Clark, who just signed a massive contract extension in the NBA. So congrats to him. But, I think Caden because he's so athletic and is so big compared to the high school ranks, the fundamental base left a little bit to be desired when he got to Gonzaga. Now, he did play for a good high school coach who worked on a lot of that stuff, but sometimes once you get in a game situation or you're in a competitive practice, your instincts kick in. And for Caden, I think it's his instincts just to physically overpower people or jump over them. Where then when you get to the college game, you're not going to be able to do that quite so much. He, though, has those athletic attributes that I think he will be able to do those things at the college level. But the thing that has kind of hampered him has been injuries. He only played a handful of games last year. I thought he had a couple nice stretches in those games that he played at last year with energy and being on the offensive glass and, contesting shots at the rim. But he really was unhealthy. He had back surgery just recently in the last couple of weeks as he back to 5-on-5 full court. And so I think what you're going to see is a little bit of work in progress throughout the year. First, you got to get your skills back. You got to get your understanding back of what you're trying to do and accomplish in different spaces, scenarios, situations on the court, as well as then how it fits within Gonzaga's philosophies. And you got to get your game pace back, which it's hard enough as a freshman because he missed it. But now you're basically, it's a freshman year because he missed most of last year and coming off an injury. So I expect good things out of Caden. I think he's got a chance to be a really good player, but I think fans need to be patient because he's still essentially a freshman. But I do think the future is positive and it's very bright for Caden as a Zag. Last question comes from Jeff in Seattle. As a longtime Zag fan in the battle in Seattle, why no game in Seattle this year? Well, good question, Jeff. It's hard to add another high-profile game to Gonzaga's schedule when you look at the list of who they're playing. Kentucky at the Spokane Arena, at Texas. You're playing in the PK 85 right down the road from Seattle in Portland. You're playing Michigan State on an aircraft carrier. You're playing Alabama in Birmingham, which is the return game from last year's battle in Seattle. So I just don't think, I think as much as the staff and Coach Few would like to have a game in Seattle each year, I think it has to make sense depending on how the rest of the schedule breaks out. I know with that 6-year deal with Kentucky, one of those games, if my memory serves me right, will be played in Seattle. So I think that's great to see. Seattle, now that Key Arena has become Climate Pledge Arena, it's I haven't been in it, but I've heard nothing but great things. Should be home for a lot of high-level college basketball games, possibly some shootouts, some NCAA tournaments over the next course of a few years. But it is always nice to see Gonzaga playing in that battle in Seattle this year. A no game in Seattle, and again, I think it just becomes there's only so many dates that you can put together a good non-conference opponent, and that the date works for both teams, and then it has to work for the venue that's holding it. So would not be surprised. I actually kind of expect them to be back there next season. But I can imagine as a Seattle Zag fan, you are a little disappointed. So appreciate all the questions. Keep them coming my way. We're only about, like, as I said, 9 days away from an exhibition, a preseason secret scrimmage. And then we're about 2 weeks away or so from an actual outside opponent in Warner Pacific as an exhibition game. So appreciate you listening. For Gonzaga Nation SI, this has been the ISO with another Mailbag Wednesday episode.